Finally, I did it. I am no longer a paying subscriber of Adobe Creative Cloud, and honestly, I gotta say, it feels quite nice. If you're a web designer or designer in general, you have probably had the same struggle. Adobe is expensive, their policies feel outright disrespectful, but at the same time, we have built our careers with the tools like Photoshop and Illustrator. So even if we wanted, could we survive without Adobe? That is the question, and today I'm going to share you my experience of what it's like to live and work without Adobe. I'll go through everything I used to use Adobe for as a professional web designer, and hopefully by the end of this video I have convinced you that you actually do not need that big ass subscription. Hi guys, my name is Janne, I'm a designer friend from Finland, and let's be clear, this is a web designer's perspective. So if you're a graphic designer, the breakup would be and will be much harder. It would be like a Finnish person promising to never go to sauna again. Photoshop, Illustrator, and even InDesign, they all are quite ingrained in most graphic workflows. There are, of course, alternatives, some of which I'll go through in this video, but I just want to emphasize that Adobe has a firm grip on graphic designers' toolkit. In web design, it's a different story. Adobe products are mainly in a supporting role. For example, my main tools are Webflow and Figma, and since I'm not replacing those, I have a much better chance of actually teaching Adobe. I also know that some web designers love Adobe, and that is absolutely fine. I'm just here to tell you that Adobe Creative Cloud is not a must-have for web designers. If you feel otherwise, debate me in the comments. Okay, let's get to the actual content. Here's a list of concrete things I used to do with Adobe products. Instead of just talking about alternative software, I will go through them individually and explain how I handle each use case in my post-Adobe era. I will start with the ones I do most often, and you can jump ahead using the timestamps in the description. Let's start with erasing backgrounds. This is of course a thing that we must do on a daily basis, and back in the day Photoshop was the only tool for this. But luckily nowadays every app has a erase background feature. Your fridge probably has one too, but in this case we're gonna try out the Figma erase background tool. This is a image from Unsplash, and I'm just gonna click actions, and recent functions already has remove background. You can also try to find it. There's a remove background, and let's see how it does. And here we go. I gotta say, it does quite a good job, and I find this to be good enough for most of my use cases. Of course, you have other tools like, well, Canva, if you want to use that. There are separate tools for just removing backgrounds, like online based and even free tools. And then if nothing else is good enough for you, I also have Affinity Photo. You might have heard that Adobe has quite good AI tools, but Affinity Suite also has some tricks at its sleeves. Here's a new object selection tool. Let's try that one. Again, we need to wait a bit. Actually, it already selected all the persons right here, and we can just choose which ones we want to select. So I just clicked around and picked everything I want to select, and let's try masking. It could have done a better job, but then again, I can continue refining this with the same masking tools I would have in Photoshop. Painting white, it will show the things, and if I paint in black, it will hide the things. So a tool I'm already familiar with. Moving on to cropping and resizing an image, I'm gonna start with Figma and the same image. Of course, I want to crop the empty space around people. I'm just holding Command and doing this. And when I'm ready, I can just export the image, and I can export all sorts of elements. So if I have multiple images, I have created a collage, I can export that as a one image. There is not like every known file format or image format in the export settings, but I feel that PNG and JPEG SVG is just enough for me. When I go to Webflow, I usually compress the images there, unless they are in SVG. So those are just fine with me. I can also choose the size I want to export the images. If I need a specific size, I can just put it in here. Otherwise, I can export it in scale, like double the size if I want. And this is quite handy when I'm designing, let's say, a website layout and the canvas is already in the right size, so the images are in a good size to begin with. Next up, vectorizing logos and of course editing those vector files. So as a web designer, I usually do not create logos, but I do need to edit and maybe vectorize some logos. You know those beautiful logo sections, and when you have that one small logo that you just cannot find a vector version of, and then you kind of need to either use a PNG file or just quickly vectorize the logo. In the past, I would use Illustrator's image trace feature, and that was very good. Then I jumped into Affinity Designer, and I was very disappointed when I could not find a feature like that in there. I am confident that Affinity folks will bridge that gap someday soon, but in the meantime, I actually found an alternative, and you guessed it, it works in Figma. So here we have a logo of some minor brand, and the plugin I use is called Image Tracer. I tried a couple of these. I gotta say, this was the best one. So let's see what we can do. Let's choose color. Smoothness should be 1. Here we go. Place traced vector. And that is again quite good. If you need to do some minor vector editing, you can do it in Figma, as you probably already know. Yeah, that makes it way better. Even before my jump out of the Adobe camp, I really liked to do those minor vector works in Figma, just because it's a bit more simple and I already have my designs in there, so why not? And about that image trace plugin I used, I will link it down below, and you can try it freely. If you're a one-man band, a freelancer, you can buy a lifetime license with $10, which is a bargain if you ask me. Okay, this is interesting. Adobe Fonts. So on a published website, the fonts are not an issue because your client should have the actual license, and you don't have to have the Adobe subscription, even if your clients want to use Adobe Fonts. But the problem is on the design phase. How can you try out Adobe Fonts, let's say in Figma? In my experience, the internet is of course full of fonts and typefaces, and even those that are listed on Adobe Fonts usually have a creator or foundry that provides a trial for that specific typeface. Here's an example. So font name or typeface called Kofo Cable Tau, maybe. I just Googled it, and the second result is Contrast Foundry. Let's check it out. Okay, we have this right here. Of course, they want us to purchase it, but try for free. You might need to make an account and choose the style, but in any way, you can try it out freely. Of course, I cannot guarantee that you will find every typeface listed in Adobe Fonts as a free trial, but then again, maybe try to look for other ways of getting fonts. And if your client requests a specific font, they might want to do the design themselves, or you can just ask if they can provide the font for you. Next case, generating images. So you know that we live in an AI era, so I gotta mention this one too. If you're a web designer, there's basically two reasons you are generating images. Either you are just gonna use them as placeholders in your designs, or you are planning to actually publish them on a live site. In the first case, you are just aiming for the right context, so the actual quality of the image does not matter that much. In the second case, you are of course searching for the tool that gets you the most realistic results. Adobe has Firefly and their integrated generative fill tools in at least Photoshop and Illustrator, but to be honest, I believe if one is like really selling AI generated images as a part of a package, they probably have some sort of dedicated tool for that. I have used Midjourney, but nowadays I'm rocking Freepik AI Suite. It has all these cool tools like retouching, expanding, upscaling. So I kind of like this one, but I'm not like chained to this. So if there is something better down the line, I will probably switch. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention that you can generate images in Figma too, so check this out. So obviously these are a bit weird. For some reason the eyes are not lining up. But anyway, for placeholders, these could be just fine. Okay, so far we have erased backgrounds, generated images, cropped and resized images, edited vectors, and vectorized some raster images. And I feel that that is quite a good toolkit for a web designer already. I still have a couple more use cases, but before those, please consider subscribing. That would mean the world to a small channel like me. Okay, video editing. Hear me out. That is not usually the responsibilities of a web designer, but you would be surprised how often I end up clipping and compressing videos for, let's say, a background of a hero section. I used to use Premiere Pro and even Premiere Rush just to get my money's worth out of that expensive subscription. I tried CapCut, it was mostly fine, it made me feel young, but then they put the one feature I really liked behind a paywall, and the feature would be normalizing the volume. So now I'm testing out DaVinci Resolve and the free version of it, and I gotta say it feels quite intuitive. It might not have all the bells and whistles CapCut has, meaning the modern presets, but again, I feel that it has enough for my needs. Second to last, bulk editing photographs. Yeah, I know this is not like so web design related, but actually the first Adobe product that I mastered was Adobe Lightroom. I used to take a lot of photos, and of course, when you're taking photos, you kind of want to bulk edit them. I do not get paid to take photos, but every now and then I just shoot a bunch of photos and I want to edit them in bulk. In that case, I turn to Darktable. So Darktable is open source and free alternative to Lightroom. It gets the job done. I'm not as efficient with it, at least yet, as I would be if I used Lightroom. But then again, as I said, I'm not getting paid to edit the photos, so I'm fine if the process takes me a little bit longer, as long as the results are the same. And the last thing is really niche. It again relates to my hobbies. A local school has this laser engraver / cutter, and if you want to engrave something, you need a BMP file. For some reason, Affinity Photo and Designer do not export to BMP, so I end up doing some sort of workaround. I either use an online converter or maybe even Paint or GIMP, but those are not like, so to speak, efficient. So if you happen to know any better way of exporting BMPs, please let me know. Behold the big conclusion. So if you watched all the chapters, you already know that I'm not going back. I find that there is not a single reason to use Adobe. Of course, you might like it. You might feel that it's a reasonable price, but I would again say that it is not a must-have. Other than money, there are of course the moral reasons to make the switch. You probably already know that they use your images and designs to train their AI, and they have quite strict unsubscription policies. And I think that they outright take advantage of their status as the industry standard. I would love to live in a world where big companies are held responsible on their actions. And I gotta say, I'm lucky that I'm in a situation where I can make decisions based on my values. I know that many of you feel like you have to continue using Adobe products, but hopefully the future is brighter and there will be proper alternatives for every use case. But that's the end of this video. For your next video, check out the recommendation somewhere around here. YouTube thinks that you might like it.